Erin continues rumbling in the Atlantic, and no, I'm not going to stop with the Attack on Titan references until the day that this storm dissipates. Following that, we have two other areas to watch closely in the tropical Atlantic. Hey there, my name is Eric. If you're new here, I am an inspiring meteorologist currently in college, working my way towards my atmospheric science degree, a storm chaser, photographer, videographer, among a lot of other things that I do for some reason. If you like weather content, you should consider following me, not just on YouTube, but on Instagram. I post storm chasing videos as well as these weather analysis videos, and I plan to post a lot of scientific and educational stuff on past storm events. So if you are interested in that kind of stuff, consider subscribing. I don't think you'll regret it at all, and I'd really appreciate the support. Today we're going to be analyzing Hurricane Erin's forecast, as well as go over a couple of other areas to watch. I think the whole East Coast has been pretty much on the fence about this storm, just worrying about it, because obviously it's getting a little too close for comfort. In fact, impacts are already being felt in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and even along the coast of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, even up to Virginia and New England. It was a few days ago that I uploaded my first analysis video on Erin, and briefly after that, in fact, within 24 hours of becoming a hurricane, it intensified into a Category 5 hurricane very briefly, which makes it not only the first hurricane of the Atlantic season this year, but as well the first Category 5 hurricane at the same time, which is actually kind of crazy. It has gone through a lot of restructuring since, and currently it is, just by looking at it, it is characteristic of a strong Category 2 that has expanded its wind field, and its wind field continues to expand. What's really interesting is you have those sort of, it's a really strong system, but it's not completely solid. It's got like those kind of interrupted bands going towards the center, and it's only just now starting to get an eye back, and it's a strong Cat 2. So it's a little bit of an education on hurricanes. Something interesting that happens with these storms whenever they weaken to lower categories but still remain relatively strong. The reason why they get bigger and sort of appear like they're weaker, as you can see, there's a little less of a tightened core here, and you can see there's like interruptions in the rain bands. It's because their pressure gradients get less steep. So Cat 4, Cat 5 has a stronger pressure gradient, and therefore it holds everything in a more tight core. But with these hurricanes, it's almost like when they downgrade, they relax. The wind doesn't go away. However, the angular momentum is still preserved, and the wind still rotates around the storm wall, not as fast. But it's almost like the storm relaxes, and it allows everything to expand. While the winds are not as strong, it covers a wider area, which in some cases can end up making the hurricane more devastating if it is directly hitting land. In terms of storm surge, because of the kind of manipulation it has on the water, if it pushes a wider field of water, essentially it's going to push more water onto shore, and we saw that with Hurricane Ike in 2008. Even though it was just a Cat 2, it produced like Cat 4, nearly Cat 5 storm surge in Galveston and Bolivar. So Erin here actually looks a lot like Hurricane Ike, like kind of eerily similar to Hurricane Ike when it was entering the Gulf after it restructured after going over Cuba, because Ike was a Cat 3 or Cat 4 when it hit Cuba, and then lost some energy because it went over land, but then re-intensified, and it does this usual restructuring thing, and it's really quite beautiful, actually. It's, I mean, when you see a Cat 5, or Cat 5 or Cat 4, they tend to look a lot more compact and symmetrical, but with this, it's like, it's more lopsided, but it's bigger, and it's kind of like it just has more character, and it's kind of beautiful in a way. This is coming from someone who just has a fixation on like weather and hurricanes, and just like hurricanes, they're just beautiful. Honestly, I have a really weird love for them. Anyways, but this is like textbook, like it kind of, I mean, it's a pretty symmetrical storm. Earlier today, and especially yesterday, it was a bit lopsided, but it is now like, it's a textbook storm. I mean, we're lucky that it's not hitting land directly, but we'll talk about that more. So we'll get a bit of a closer look here. You can see Outer Banks of North Carolina currently have tropical storm warnings. You can see the wind field radii. The darker colors in the center are hurricane force, the red is hurricane force, and then the outer greens are tropical storm force. As you can see, based on where the hurricane is going, none of the coast will get any of that hurricane wind core. However, it will get close enough to end up with tropical storm force winds, and we actually have warnings up in Virginia Beach, as well as northern parts of the North Carolina coast, as well as Maryland. Storm surge warnings along the Outer Banks of North Carolina, which will likely end up flooding Highway 12 and a lot of low-lying areas. So people living out there will want to watch out. Like I said, it's not going to be a direct impact, and wind is not so much of a concern, although it is still a minor threat. Storm surge, considering the shape of the coast here, storm surge is a concern. So you'll mostly be getting tropical storm force wind gusts. As you can see, as it approaches the coast and makes its closest approach, it will remain a still pretty tight storm despite the restructuring that has gone through. And you can see we actually have some pretty tight isobars here as well. And it's pretty confident at this point that it's going to remain offshore. Furthermore, you can see there will also be wind impacts up into New England, as well as Canada, like Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. Most of those tropical storm force winds are going to remain offshore. However, it's still worth keeping an eye on because the track could change. And generally you just want to be wary. So we are going to get a bit more of a detailed look at the wind forecast here. As you can see, those fairly strong tropical storm force winds are going to make their way into the Outer Banks, but still that core is not going to be close enough to bring hurricane force winds. But again, the biggest threats are just storm surge and rough surf, especially just pretty much along the entire East Coast. Generally just want to stay out of the water, watch for rip currents as this thing goes through. Definitely going to get some coastal erosion as well. So focusing again on the storm surge, as you can see, the worst surge is actually going to be focused on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. You can see inundation up to 4 feet, and other areas up to into New England, and as far south as Santee River in South Carolina, 1 to 3 feet surge. A really good tool that I recommend from the National Weather Service is their storm inundation map. You can get a detailed look at exactly what areas are going to likely receive the respective surge. And right now I'm looking at places like Hatteras. You can see those intertidal zones are definitely going to get the storm surge, and even places inland. Rip currents have already been a threat that we've been dealing with over the past several days, and they're going to just get worse as Erin makes its closest approach. And there have already actually been a lot of water rescues, so again, it's just best to stay out of the water because it's those rip currents, especially in the current conditions, can take you pretty far out. Overall, just best to avoid the beach and the coast, and especially going out into the water. So we're going to go over the upper dynamics that are steering Erin, and that will continue to steer Erin. Going forward, you can see the Bermuda High is basically what Erin steers around, but it's not strong enough to push it directly onshore. And in the northeast, we have a trough, which is essentially that blueberry-looking thing there that sucks Erin with it going to the northeast past Canada. And going beyond that, you can see there is a giant trough that actually develops over Canada and the northeast U.S. So this is a mid-latitude low pressure trough, and it's going to essentially drag cold air from Canada into the northeast, which is going to allow for a lower than average temperature outlook over that region, which is going to bring in some fall air, which will be nice. Definitely a nice change for the weather we've been having lately with how hot it's been. So for a more detailed forecast here, this is the temperature outlook. As you can see, on the left you have 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, and on the right is 8 to 14 day. So through September 3rd, basically we're going to have below average temperatures in the northeast and along the east coast. because of this mid-latitude pressure system drawing in cooler air. Unfortunately for us here in Texas, we're just going to still see normal temperatures, which means surface of the sun hot pretty much this time of the year. So moving forward, we're going to take a look at those two disturbances currently out in the tropical Atlantic. Switching to satellite here, you can actually see those two disturbances. Here further to the west, just north of South America, you have disturbance, the first disturbance. That one definitely looks a lot less organized than the one further to the east. But this one is actually expected to take a similar path that Erin took due to steering patterns. And as of now, it's probably more likely that it won't be a threat to land, but it's still something that you want to monitor. If you look at the one closer to Africa, it actually is really becoming characteristic of an organized low pressure system, and it's currently not even like a tropical depression. I don't even think it's an NVEST yet. It's just a tropical wave. And switching over to shortwave infrared here, just to have a better consistent view. I mean, it really does look like something pretty organized for something that's not designated yet. There's like some mid-level or low-level rotation going on in there, and it's kind of impressive actually. So there's definitely convection, and it has plenty of fuel to work with as it continues traveling west, and it's just something that we want to keep an eye on. Now here's something else that's pretty interesting. This will be like a bit of education, I guess, a little education bit of the video, but basically, so far, the European model doesn't show anything coming from that second disturbance yet, I think. Yeah, so the first disturbance, you can see it tracks northward and forms a low pressure system, and it just goes north, showing it going further out to sea actually than Erin did. But again, it's still too far out to be confident in what exactly it's going to do. But if you go over to the GFS, so as I said, so that second disturbance closer to Africa is expected to stay further south, and odds are it will end up in the Caribbean. With that low pressure system over there, odds are it will end up in the Caribbean. And something I noticed, now while we start getting into the less reliable hours that the GFS has to offer, once you get past forecast hour 156, which is about right here, I'm not seeing that second disturbance popping up anywhere as something notable. Into, as I said, the less reliable hours that this has to offer, it seems like probably what is the Central American gyre throws out a low pressure system that moves into the Gulf and then makes its way up to Texas/Louisiana, right on that border there, and you can see that's what would be a pretty strong hurricane. Now, don't take this as a reason to prepare for a hurricane or panic, because odds are one is not going to hit. It could. Sometimes, I mean, you can see we're in hour 384, right? That's really far out, and usually anything that the GFS throws at this hour is what you call ghost hurricanes. Essentially, the data is, it's just so far out that the data stops becoming so reliable, and everything butterflies basically into something that's likely not going to happen, or maybe it's not going to unfold to that extent. However, sometimes if it gets everything just right, there have been some instances where even this far out, it will predict something that actually ends up happening. So it's possible, not likely. But that's just something that I noticed and I wanted to point out. But it is at this point just a ghost hurricane, and it's not something to, it's likely not something to look at right now. It could like I said, just focus on those two other disturbances that we have going on. That's kind of just a bit of education I wanted. My point is, if you see something like this, if you're looking at these kinds of models, usually you want to not make a big deal of it. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty strong hurricane right there. But again, like that's really far out. So that's not anything to be concerned about right now. But I just thought that was kind of interesting, and I thought it would be worth sharing. Just in case anyone watching is interested in getting into looking at these models. The further, to surmise, the further you get out, the less reliable this stuff becomes. And if you see an anomaly like that, just don't take it seriously yet. Let's see, even on the height anomaly, it's throwing that there in the Gulf coming up to Texas. So I don't know, it's just kind of interesting. Now going further back again, you can see following Erin comes up that forecast system, and it shows it going just west of Bermuda. Of course, it's not certain that that's exactly where it's going to go, but that little tiny bullseye that you see there, that's that system. And I'm not seeing the second one yet. Might be too far out for it to give anything consistent yet, but it's still something to watch. Okay, now looking at the GEFS, you can see similarly, that first disturbance, it picks up on pretty well, and it shows it staying pretty far out to sea. But that second one, it's kind of lagging on a bit. It doesn't quite know what to do with it, and it doesn't really take it anywhere beyond this area here, unless that's it right there, but that's, I think, something else. As you see, we have Erin's track here, and by this point it'll have been long gone. And then this here is that system. And then, like I said, it's pretty uncertain of that system that's still further east. Still worth monitoring these two systems, regardless of the uncertainty with them right now. With uncertainty will eventually become certainty, and they could end up somewhere where they make a direct impact. So it's just one of those things that you just want to keep an eye on. With us being about 3 to 4 weeks out from the peak of hurricane season, you're going to start seeing more stuff like this, and odds of ending up with higher impacts and direct impacts increase. So just keep an eye on the tropics. It's always a good idea. And make sure you have your hurricane preparations already made. Honestly, just always have a supply ready, an escape route. You know where you're going to go, who you're going to call. Anyhow, that is all I have for this analysis video. I will keep updating these other two disturbances as they happen, and I will probably release one more update on Erin in the next few days. If you found this video helpful, I'd love it if you could leave a like. Again, consider subscribing if you like this kind of content, especially storm chasing stuff and weather analysis stuff. Hell, even gaming content, because I do that stuff. I play video games with my friends, and I also do vlogs and skits and other silly things. So the next semester of school is starting up in just a few days, so I'm going to be coupling that with my independent studies of weather and such. My classes personally do not start until October, just because the way that I have them selected. However, I do have extracurricular stuff going on, so I'll be doing that. But that will leave me room to do storm chasing as some of these major storms come in, if they do this season, as we see that increase going through September. But that's all for now. Take care. Stay safe out there.